We'll go ahead and start the sidewalk committee meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we got one item on the agenda, which is Burr Street sidewalk, bike trail, snow removal plan. Stephanie will have on the agenda on some of her list, she'll have what our plan that we proposed. But I'm not going to really get into a lot of detail on this. I'm going to kind of leave it up to the committee, and we have a fair amount of public here that wants to talk about this. But the main purpose of this meeting is to come to a decision on the responsibility of snow removal. Okay. The responsibility of snow removal along this corridor. This is coming back to you from our spring meeting that we had when we first presented this plan. And this map is the same kind of map that we gave out to all the property owners along the corridor. Just kind of give them a heads up and give tonight's meeting a chance for them to comment on this issue. So we'll start over on the right side. So here's the Burr Street corridor at Havens. All the green areas are areas that we're proposing the property owners take care of. What our current code is the owner or occupant of any lot or private ground abutting upon any public sidewalk shall not allow rubbish, debris, or obstruction of any kind to be remain or on such sidewalk along such abutting property. This also includes snow removal. So everywhere in town, whether it's a state right-of-way, and we have three state routes, which is Burr Street, Haven Street, and the bypass. Those are all state routes that the property owners maintain the sidewalk abutting those right-of-ways and those routes. So as you see it on the drawing, the green areas all the way up to Norway Street are the areas that we're proposing the property owners maintain. And then starting from Norway going to the interstate is where we had talked, if there is a double sidewalk, then the property owners would maintain the sidewalk closest to their property as denoted in the green. And if they're, and then the city would take care of the blue sidewalk, which is where the double sidewalk would be. So the one closest to the corridor. And then once you get to the interstate, the city would take over from that driveway there going underneath the bridge on the interstate, going to the on-off ramp, and then from then on, the adjoining property owners would take care of the sidewalk that abuts their property. Where you see those interior islands, the city would maintain those areas. Does the committee have any questions before we open it up to the public?
There are no sidewalks underneath the interstate?
There will be. That'll be part of next year. So that blue area, there will be sidewalk and bike path that go underneath the interstate. Currently no, but there will be in phase 2.
And all the property knew of this plan in the spring, you said?
Yeah. They knew about it.
Were they involved in the design of this, or they got told later?
They were told at the time when we had the public meeting.
I don't think we had a whole lot of input. The city didn't have a whole lot of input either, right?
The input that we had was on the bike trail. Do we want a bike trail along this corridor? And the city felt that it would be good to have a bike trail to tie in Cabela's, Dry Run Creek, Haven Street, some of those other cross-connecting routes. So the city and sidewalk committee had met on this before the project was even built, because the city agreed to pay the extra cost and the extra width of the bike trail.
The bike trail on both sides or one side?
Bike trail is just on the west side.
And that's how many feet is it?
Oh, it's a good mile,
I mean,
probably.
how many feet wide?
Oh, 8 feet wide,
And the other is what?
5 feet wide.
What was the purpose of double sidewalks in some areas?
The purpose of double sidewalk in some areas, we met, the DOT presented this plan to the city, and we looked at the idea of just having a sidewalk going up to the frontage road and following the frontage road and then coming back down to Norway. And there was quite a bit of discussion that felt, both from the DOT and from the city staff that was included in that meeting, that felt that there should be a sidewalk both along the backside of the frontage road and along the corridor. Because if you have people walking down that sidewalk on the corridor, and if there's no sidewalk along the Burr Street corridor, people would just walk in the grass to keep walking to Norway. They won't go all the way up and follow the sidewalk that leads to the businesses and then go back down. So that was the reason why there's the double sidewalk. We ran into this even before the project was built over by Corn Palace Motel, where there was curb and gutter and grass, and you could see where there was a earthen trail where people were walking in the grass to get off the street and creating their own path.
Were these plans designed from the beginning, or did they change as the project went on?
These plans were designed from the beginning. This same layout is the same layout that we had when we had the public meeting.
Well, yeah, that's true, although my recollection is that none of us here were really aware of that, and then the state came in to get public testimony and said, well, this is the way it is, and you can take it or you can take it. And so we took it. I guess I would be in favor of the city cleaning these sidewalks.
Well, I'm leaning towards agreeing with you, but I'd like to hear some input from the people that are affected. Does anybody in the audience want to talk?
I'm Stan Peterson, representing Campbell Supply. First of all, if I recall, you guys had said that the grass would be taken care of by the city, first of all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When I got this information on Friday, I forwarded it to my corporate office. They forwarded that to our corporate attorney. And if the snow removal is the same as what I've got on this sheet that we got Friday, very shortly it reads, the occupant or owner of any premises in the city adjacent to any sidewalk shall. The sidewalk, both sides of the sidewalk are owned by the state. None of us have property that is adjacent to the sidewalk. We're adjacent to the state property, not adjacent to the sidewalk. Done. I can't see where it can be any different. That is the state property on both sides of the sidewalk. That's adjacent to the sidewalk. We're adjacent to the state property, not the sidewalk. I think that's pretty clear in itself.
Well, I've got to say that I disagree with that interpretation. If you take that argument, every single sidewalk in this city is not adjacent to the property because it's within the right-of-way. This property isn't privately owned state property. It's public right-of-way under the control of the state of South Dakota.
So we got state property, which the sidewalk's on, is that right?
The sidewalk would be on state-controlled public right-of-way.
Then we've got the city of Mitchell's gonna do the mowing.
Right, which
We
we're
wanna have them do the snow removal.
required to do the mowing by agreement with the state.
We were talking before the meeting, Jeff. Would you share what Tyler said about his insurance company?
Or do you want to make some comments? I can certainly.
Tyler Graham with Graham's Mobile. Speaking with our insurance company, the property, the sidewalk itself is on state right of way. On my side, 8 feet from my property line is still state right of way, and our insurance company, as of right now, is not knowing how to insure something that is not ours. So, and I think that goes with pretty much everybody down the line.
So if you had an employee out there who was cleaning the snow and got injured in some way, you're not covered.
I'm not covered, no.
And maybe more importantly, if someone was walking down the sidewalk that you're responsible for covering or
Correct.
cleaning and slipped, then,
Or an oncoming car hit them, yes.
right.
Justin, if the city of Mitchell does the sidewalks, are we covered?
Well, the city's going to be secondarily liable in the situation regardless, most likely. We've tried to shift that burden over to the adjacent property owners by making them responsible for the ongoing maintenance of sidewalks and for the removal of snow and ice. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's been explained to your insurer, how you pitch the situation to them, but if you take any other gas station in town, they're going to have the same responsibility for the sidewalk that's adjacent to their property. So I don't know why in those situations it'd be something that's covered, but here it's not. Right. Well, I mean, unless it's on private property, but anything within the public right-of-way, which is going to be most of your sidewalk.
What does adjacent mean? I know what the dictionary definition is, but like I live on a corner and I have acres of sidewalk, which about 5 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to find out how much sidewalk I really have. But that's adjacent to my property. I've got trees, and the house in some cases is 4 or 5 feet away. But like with Campbell Supply, I think Stan said in an earlier meeting was like 100 feet away, something like that. I mean, so what's adjacent?
Well, that's, I guess, where there's a little bit of wiggle room. I mean, it's not defined under our code. It's not defined under state law. The way that we've interpreted is to mean that there's not something, like a road or another sidewalk in between that and, like, if you take, for example, the drawing that you see up there, and let's use the leftmost circle there. Let's just use this one for an example. I think you've got Graham's here. So this would be the adjacent most sidewalk. There's no intervening feature in between here where the property line would be and the sidewalk. Whereas if you're talking about up here, you've got the same situation where the property line's back here, but there's no intervening feature here, so this would still be adjacent too. And if you contrast that to something like this, where you've got a sidewalk closest to the property line, but then you've also got a roadway, and then you've also got another layer of sidewalk, I don't think by, the most tortured interpretation, you could call that adjacent.
This picture kind of sums up kind of my problem. If we look up here where it says first edition, So we're going to do the blue, and we're going to go around the corner, and then what? We're going to pick up the blade and drive a block, and then do the other one? I mean, that seems a little churlish to me.
Yeah, there's going to be inconsistencies no matter which way you choose to address it.
Unless we plow it. Then there's no inconsistency.
Well, then where do you draw the line? Because you've got to either do that or you've got to choose to plow it for anybody that might want theirs plowed.
Although
I don't think-
this is a new issue,
Right.
it's not something that was 5 years ago that happened when the bypass went in. I mean, this is to me, a new and unique situation.
We discussed this a little bit on the tour today. I'm not on the committee, but I was wondering, it seemed like there might be some way that we could define this that would, because it's state-owned or because of the Department of Transportation or something, that you could set this apart as a unique situation?
I don't think so. I think this has very broad implications. It comes down to what is adjacent and what is not, and that has citywide implications for every sidewalk that is in this town.
Where else in town, and maybe Terry can answer this, that the city is mowing and the private individual is removing the snow? Do we have any, Terry?
We don't.
Okay, well, I'm going to move that we remove the snow from all of this new area this year and direct Kevin Roth to keep track of what the cost is to remove it from the quote-unquote private sidewalk, which doesn't really strike me as being private. And then next year we'll have some data, we can revisit it, and we can fight it out again, we can see how it works. But it just seems to me to be not very neighborly. And I don't know what the footage is, but to do 12 feet and then leave 4 feet empty and then do 12 more feet. So that's my motion.
Mel, can I ask you to clarify that? Does that mean all the way up to Havens?
Yeah. I mean, if we're mowing, I see no reason why they're doing the sidewalk. I just really don't. And again, if this had been presented and this is no criticism of anybody in the city, it was a state project, but if this had been presented from the very beginning, but it was presented fait accompli, this is the way it is, and we were already into the project before we understood that this, was going to happen. And I don't know whose fault that is. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe it was the state's fault. But if you were asking me to plow sidewalk 100 feet from my house, I'd be down here every day.
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion by Mel for the city to remove the sidewalk and bike trail this year and to keep track of the amount that's done on the city side and the amount on the private side. Jeff seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Motion to adjourn? Who was the second?
Hey, we have
invocation from the Western Church? Anyone here?
I don't know if they are or not. My disclaimer is on the agenda. You had listed 40 minutes for sidewalk, so he may not be here
Okay,
right now.
okay. Okay, then let's do roll call.
Olson,
Here.
Rice,
Here.
Dosher, McCardle,
Here.
Barrington, Allen,
Here.
Sharks,
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Okay, approval of consent agenda items. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by a city council member for discussion at the beginning of the formal agenda items.
I noticed that we only had one bidder on our gas and fuel this time. Any insights?
I have no insight, but I have an additional question. What happens if nobody bids? Do we just shut the thing down, or what do we do?
I think that,
No, Kevin's back there.
I think we've had one other time where we didn't get any bids, right, on the gas and fuel quotes, and then
What
we went
happens
out
if
and
we don't
rebid it another week.
If we don't get a bid, then we just put it out the next day usually. What happened on this one is, all the terminals were out of the fuel that was required. We actually put it out the first day and nobody could supply us with the fuel that we needed because all the terminals were out. So we, instead of getting them just the unleaded, since we couldn't get the diesel, they could bring the unleaded, we rebid it the next day.
And that's fine, but I'm just wondering, what happens if nobody bids? Do we just park the trucks and hope for the best, or what do we do?
I'm
Is there
not
a
sure.
state
We've
bid?
we've never had that happen. Yeah, state bids out of House Oil, and they would be able to bring it. The only hangup is sometimes why you don't get people to bid is, I may be wrong, but sometimes they know the terminal's not going to have the fuel on hand that we need, so they don't submit a bid. If we had happened to get a no bid for everything, we got plenty of fuel to last us probably a week yet in the tank. We would bid it the next day, and hopefully, someone's got access to a terminal that's got some fuel for us. Otherwise, state bid is off House Oil out of Sioux Falls. They have a driver specifically for the Mitchell area here, and we can get fuel. They got other terminals they can get fuel from. It'd just be a further distance. Their biggest hangup is when we put in a quote, we expect to have the fuel that day, so everyone's on the same page, and not, okay, we can get you fuel, but we can't deliver it for tomorrow. If that's the case, then we cancel the bid and we bid it out the next day, so it's fair for everyone. Because some suppliers know that the terminals are empty and they don't submit a bid, where they're not sure the terminal's empty, so they submit a bid. Then we get a call back an hour or two later, oh, the terminal's empty, can we bring it tomorrow? Well, it's not fair to the other one, so we cancel the bid and we resubmit the bid in the morning.
So Kevin, does the state bid ever come in lower than the bids that we currently have?
The state bid is out of House, and House bid every one of them now.
But they didn't bid
And it's
this-
pretty much is the state bid price for the most part.
Is it seasonal because they're doing this or not? Are you switching to number 2 to number 1 or no?
No, well, just right now, we started getting blended and stuff.
Okay.
So it's probably, everyone's probably
Switching.
switching over to blended, so we run into this about once a year.
Right.
So the fact that House didn't bid means that the state may be low, or, I mean, how?
Well,
do you prove that?
how is it?
I know, but they didn't bid this time.
Yeah, because they didn't have access to the fuel.
Right.
That was
So
the
that's my question.
Mitchell terminal one.
Oh.
They could get fuel from another terminal, which would have probably increased the transport price.
Kevin, we talked about this in the past, and I don't know if it's worth reviewing or not at some point, but is any cities ever go out and bid a whole year?
Yes, and that is an option if you guys want to proceed with that. I can sure try to do that. I know I've seen Donnie. I've talked to him in the past, him and his brother, I believe. And Don can correct me if I'm wrong. He knows a little more about this than I do. But sometimes it's really hard to get a competitive price from multiple suppliers, doing it that way, I believe.
Because you just don't know what's going to happen internationally.
Yeah, and it's tough for them to give you a good number and then all of a sudden have the field just totally turn on them, and it could probably really devastate a company, I'm guessing. But like I said, I know I've talked to Donnie and his brother in the past about this, and we talked about doing it that way possibly, and he thought it probably wouldn't be in the best interest, if I recall.
And I believe that's partly why the state law changed several years ago, allowing for the quotes in lieu of the annual bidding, because I can tell you, even at the county, we were having trouble getting anyone to bid a price that would be for the full year.
And I'm not objecting to doing it that way. If that's something you guys want to proceed with, I can sure meet with Myers and a few others, and we can get a quote for the year.
How about half a year every time, twice a year? Would that be better? I think that'd be,
6 months
there you go.
or quarterly.
Well, you know your cost.
If you want to give me a little insight, I can sure get some numbers, from Donnie and a few others, and see if it's something that we can work with.
As long as you're up there, I have a question on a different subject. The first snowstorm is always the panic one.
You usually don't have a blizzard like this.
Right. I mean, the kids were at 10 o'clock this morning. What time do you think we're going to get out?
Yep.
But we're ready?
Yeah.
Sand and...
Yep. Yeah, we're all ready to go. Yep. I got trucks out there right now. Yeah, it really turned ice in a hurry on us. There's not much you can do about it. But yeah, there's trucks out right now yet. They've been out for about 3 hours, 4 hours already.
One good thing about it, we got a winter, 1 month out of the way.
Yep.
I was going to report during your sidewalk committee report, but I think it's important to note that when you're requesting the documentation of the cost, that's not going to come from Kevin's department. That's Park and Rec who clears that off. So that's who will be making the report to you.
Yep. Street. Yep. My equipment's a little too big for the sidewalks. Yeah. I only have to do it once quick.
Kevin, one last question.
Yep.
Mike, when you're talking with suppliers, point out what works for them to be most competitive, quarterly, semi-annually, Annual doesn't seem to make sense, but
Yep.
maybe something other than 6 months.
Yeah, I'll sit down with Donnie and try to figure something out. And yep, that's not a problem. Yep.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda items.
Any further discussion? Public comment? Hearing none, roll call.
Olson.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
Dosher. McCardle.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Tarks.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Carried. Citizens input. If you need to address the mayor and members of the city council on an item that was not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium and state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken at this time.
I've been getting a lot of good comments on the Christmas lights down in Veterans Park. People have been saying how pretty and nice it looks down there. And I agree with them. I think it looks really nice. And the tree will probably look nice tomorrow.
What time is that tomorrow, Stephanie?
7.
Santa will be
Well,
there?
the thing at the Corn Palace starts at 4 o'clock. The event at the Corn Palace starts at 4.
4 to 7.
4 to
So if you
7.
want to bring your grandkids
Great,
to
it's
see
at 7.
Santa, come between 4 and 7 and eat chili and cookies.
It's a good thing they moved it till Tuesday to avoid the council meeting, as John pointed.
there anybody in the public that wants to come to the podium and address the council for any issue? Anything else?
Sir, are you our minister? Yes, I am. Could we maybe,
Yeah, let's, we'll end citizens input then, and we'll do the invocation from the Westland Church then. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pray with me. Father, I'm thankful and humbled and honored to have the privilege of lifting our city leaders to you tonight. Thank you for each one and their willingness to serve. And God, I pray that you would infuse them with mental and physical energy tonight. They've already put in a full day, yet the discussions they're going to have and the decisions that they make have far-reaching implications for us. God, I pray that you would give them wisdom, not just to discern right from wrong, but with many of the decisions they face, it's a choice between best over what's good. And Lord, help them discover what is best. Lord, I pray that when their heads hit the pillow tonight, it would be in peace over the work that's been done. And I pray that as they hit the ground running in the morning, Lord, they would be blessed with unexplainable energy, focus, and enthusiasm because they served here tonight. And I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the committee report, sidewalk report.
Sidewalk Committee met tonight at 6 o'clock. We had one item on the agenda, which was responsibility of cleaning snow on the sidewalks on Burr Street. A lot of discussion about liability, difference between public right-of-way and DOT right-of-way. There was a motion from Mel to remove all the sidewalk this year, keep track of it. The Parks Department will be doing the snow removal. Keep track of the difference of time between the city responsibility sidewalk and property owner responsibility sidewalk. And motion was adjourned at 6:19.
I would request that that item be brought to consideration of the full council.
well, when we vote on the committee report, it really is in front of the full council. It's open for discussion now.
My main point here, I just need to make sure that the council understands that they're basically undermining our ability to enforce our current snow and ice removal policy.
Well, I don't think that's true, because there's no place else in the city where we do the mowing and then the homeowner does the sidewalk. And if we want to, amend the motion to make that clear, then that's fine. But you don't mow my boulevard and then I clean the sidewalk. I mean, it's just a matter of fundamental fairness. If this had been presented before this project even started, and these people would have had an opportunity to, make the case that they're making now, that would be different. And I don't think that's any fault of anybody in the city. My recollection is, it might be a faulty recollection, but my recollection is the state guy showed up and said, oh, by the way, this is what we're doing. And it's the first time that we heard about it. And it was the first time the property owners had to respond to it. So I don't understand why this removal says that if Mel Olson doesn't clean his sidewalk, we're cleaning it off. I just don't understand how those two go together.
It comes back to adjacent. And if we're just going to arbitrarily, make an exception here to what is adjacent and what is not, then we can't enforce the entire ordinance. We can't selectively enforce it.
And I don't think it's arbitrary, because what we're saying is we are mowing the right-of-way, and that breaks up the adjacentness, that's a word, between the property and the sidewalk.
I think if that's the way that we want to go, then we need to bring forth an ordinance to define what we consider as adjacent.
Can I just make a note? We don't mow that whole all the way to Havens. We just mow about halfway, where the that last section down there, we don't actually mow the grass.
And that's because there's a median where you're talking, right?
Yeah, up to the medians, that's where
Right.
we have always mowed in the past and would be mowing in the future. When you get beyond that, we don't mow all the way to Havens. I'm just making a note of that.
I'm trying to picture what those properties are like. Do any of them have the same issues of distance and
Yeah.
lawn and?
So right now we would be the other side that we'll be mowing new is on the south of, but the snow removal would end at the corner, and we would go to a certain spot, but we wouldn't continue down to the next business. So like Walmart would be an example over by Cabela's even. So we would have to stop there, and we wouldn't continue the snow removal because Cabela's takes care of that area.
So to define the area a little bit better, from Corona Village on, I think it's Juniper.
We need to dim the light for the audience again. Yes?
So from Corona Village going all the way to Havens, the property owners take care of that sidewalk because the grass area is a lot narrower in that area. So Corona Village, Corn Palace Motel, and Walgreens on the west side. And then State Farm, the Wells Fargo building of Thompson's. And then you got Cenex, Dale Long Transmission, and the Corn Palace Apartments. Those are all areas that are maintained by the property owners just because their grass area is a lot narrower than as you go to the south.
And those sidewalks were there in the past?
No,
No,
it's all
they're
new.
They're all new.
The only thing that isn't new is Walgreens. That was there.
Well, you confused me when you said the property owners have maintained them. I assumed they had maintained them. in the
They
past.
mow their grass down that way, John. They did mow their grass down there.
Well, if we want to have an ordinance to define adjacent, I guess I'm not opposed to that, but I just think it's fundamentally unfair to have these people, especially depending on, where you're talking about, clean these sidewalks that never existed before. And like I say, it's different when you're putting in new sidewalk and you're doing it in somebody's lawn. Okay, they're not happy about it, they're not happy about the expense, but they own the property on either side of the sidewalk, and it's truly adjacent. It's not way the heck out there.
I guess Stephanie brought up a procedural concern here. We do need to take into consideration SDCL 127-118 on working group reports, which says that governing body shall delay taking any official action on the recommendations, findings, or reports until the next meeting of the governing body when dealing with subcommittee recommendations, findings, or reports.
That's a state law.
Okay, well, now I'm confused. We got 3 or 4 inches coming down tonight. What's Stan supposed to do tomorrow?
Clear the snow.
And how long does he do that?
Even if you took action tonight, the action may still be referable, could not be going to
All right.
effect for another 20 days
I get
anyway,
it.
so.
I just know there was a city or a county that was taken to the Open Meeting Commission over that very same thing, and they were in violation, so.
And I'm not opposed to having Justin come back with an ordinance or to see if we can clean this up, but I totally agree, and I voted for it with Mel, is there was some injustice, I believe, here, and if we need to work with them a year and then come back and see what makes sense. You know, these guys were put into, they got a beautiful road out there, but they went through a hell of a summer to get it too. And I know that has nothing to do with snow, but at least I think we're trying to be good neighbors and try to work this situation. So I have no problem with Justin coming back and looking at this, but I guess what we've got in front of us right now is the committee report, and if you guys accept the committee report, then that's the direction we're heading for.
And I would just add to that I think it might be a horse of a different color if we weren't right there shoveling the snow all the way around and then just lifting, you're exactly right, lifting the blade and driving on to the next spot. I feel like that was my question today on the tour was, well, gosh, it seems like it'd just be a kindly thing to do to just keep going and finish the little thing and have that cleared off. I feel like that's and I know that law isn't based on being kind or neighborly necessarily, unfortunately. But I think that there are times when we should at least consider what we can do to help our businesses, succeed and be prosperous. And so I would be supportive of us finding a way to make that work.
And I think Susan hits on an important point. And, if I'm being a little bit chippy tonight, it's because we're talking about two different things. We're talking about law and we're talking about equity. And I think everybody here understands that there's certainly something about this that just doesn't seem to make sense and may not be fair. But we're talking about what the law says too. And that's what I'm talking about, is what the law says. So if you want to change your law to be more equitable, then I think that's the way you've got to go about doing it.
But then you take the action to do so you have the definition on hand, so we're not subjective.
I agree with Mel and Susan, but it might be a dumb question. How does the state get out of not doing the sidewalks?
They put it on our shoulders.
Well,
the state property, that's, how do they get out of not taking care of the state?
Right, it kind of
state
comes
land?
back to the city being a subsidiary of the state. So I guess we kind of get to do what they tell us most of the time.
But the city has to be business friendly, and I just don't think we are when we make them do it either.
Kevin, when I was in the legislature, we had a saying, and it was this: nothing's impossible if somebody else has to do it.
And let's just not forget the whole issue that Tyler's having with insurance. I mean, I feel like that's huge. I don't feel like we can give a business that kind of a liability where we're saying this is your responsibility and your insurance is saying we won't insure you for it. How do we do that? So I think that we have to take that into consideration and find a way.
Even on that issue, though, if we're talking about just snow and ice, sure, we can go and, decide to change the ordinance or do whatever it is for the city to take care of that. But they're still going to be responsible for the condition of that sidewalk. So if the concrete gets broken up and somebody trips and falls on it, that's still going to be a concern for them. So I don't know. Their insurance companies need to be cognizant of that, or they need to find another insurance company.
So they're responsible for the maintaining of the sidewalk, like in the summer, anytime, right? Is that what it
Right.
is?
So if it's a nuisance down the road, they pay for it.
Right, and that's not just under city ordinance, that's under state law. So we're not going to be changing that one.
So Justin, remind me and the others about our mowing contract. Is that in perpetuity, or is that an annual contract? Or
With the state?
Yeah.
Terry might be able to fill you in a little bit better on that. I think it originated back when, like 40-some years ago, when the state originally did the project. Basically, the city's responsible for the mowing of any of that portion of grass that's in the right-of-way that's within city limits. That's my understanding of it.
That's correct.
There's no ending.
There's no ending until there's another project. So we approved a maintenance contract when this project got started. And we had another maintenance contract before then that went back 40 years when they did maintenance to Haven Street and to Burr Street. And those are just a contract that we approve whenever it comes due, when there's a new project that has a function of it.
What's all in that maintenance project or contract?
That the city shall maintain the streets. We have to maintain some of the light. It all has to do with streets, grass, sidewalk, signs, lighting. But we use, like Justin and I were talking about for the sidewalk issue, the same with Havens, the same with the bypass, is we use our ordinance to take care of the sidewalk portion for snow removal. So this could come back at us on Havens and the bypass.
I was just going to point out for those that weren't on the tour, when we went on the bypass, there are some businesses that have curb and gutter that don't currently have sidewalk, but according to the current city ordinance, probably would have sidewalk in the future, and you're going to have a very similar situation in that area for those who didn't take the tour.
Justin, just out of curiosity, I'm just kind of brainstorming options. Obviously, at this point, the city, and I'm going to use the word ownership because I don't know what else we call it, responsibility. So the city has responsibility for all of those areas in blue. Is there any way to expand that so that we accept responsibility for the areas in green? Because of due to the fact that these were part of this state project, they're technically not on the property. They weren't installed by the property owners. Is there any way that we can assume responsibility or ownership of those?
I think we're going to have to try to find some way to define adjacent to make that work. Otherwise, the city would have to own the property next to it, and I don't see that being a feasible alternative.
Well, we own the state owns the property it's on.
It's public
No,
right
it's
away.
public right away, so it's not privately owned by the state.
It's different. It's not like the land that they own where the DOT building is sitting on. It's a public right of way.
Okay,
Just think of it like it doesn't have an owner.
Okay, so then, does do the blue sidewalks have an owner? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I'm following you there.
Somebody gets hurt on the blue sidewalk. Somebody gets hurt on the blue sidewalk. Whose liability is that?
Likely, well, it depends on the facts and circumstances, but I'm sure they'd try to sue the city.
Well, if we have to revisit an ordinance, that's fine, but I'm happy to move approval of the committee report tonight.
Is there a second? Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is project updates.
I do have, I think John is here. Nope, he didn't? Okay. We talked to him earlier, or I at least talked to him, I think you did too, about 3rd and Main. He just said that there's still some work being done. There's nothing new really to report other than they're continuing. The work hasn't completely stopped at this point. It's not at a rate, of course, that everyone would like to see, but it's still moving forward. I'm going to just introduce something for Michelle to go over too. As you know, we budgeted for online billing and cash collections this year. That has been completed, so I'm going to let Michelle just give you an overview of how that's going to work and for the people in the public in case they want to start utilizing that service as well.
So as of December 1st, the online billing for utility billing has been turned on. So you can go to a website to pay your utility bill. There's also a direct number you can call that's automated to pay your utility bill. So instead of calling our office directly, you can do everything automated through the phone as well. And all the information will be going out on the December utility bills.
And if I was hoping I could pull it up on here, but it's not working for me to show up in my browser. But if you go to the city's website, on the left-hand side, there's a little yellow button that says online payments. You can click right on that and it'll take you right on to the online payment website where you can find your information.
Then you can set up, register as a member. You'll need your last month's payment amount to certify who you are for security reasons. And you can call our office to get that if you do not have it.
So currently, I'm set up through ACH just directly. Well, what's different from this, that you initiate the city to go ahead and put it in place?
ACH, that's initiated.
By
The city just does that automatically every month. To pay it online, you would have to go in monthly.
So this is for the people who otherwise might come in and drop off a payment or walk into the office and
Like me.
and submit a payment.
And want to pay by credit card.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so then you can pay
So,
by credit card. Both.
Here's another question, Michelle. I don't know if we're still doing this. Do we do the roundup thing that it benefits the
That is still in
community
effect.
scholarship?
Yep.
And then since I'm on ACH, I can't do that. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
More than likely?
Yep.
And then would that be the case? But this one you might be able to, since,
You might. I'll need to check into that
Yeah.
and see if there's something our software provider can help us.
what does that generate in a year? Do you have any idea? Yeah.
I'm thinking it's about 1,100. Just off the top of my head without.
That's set up now where a guy can do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And there'll
the
be
forms are-
notices in the next billing that you have going out.
Yeah, all the information with the phone number to call to pay your bill through the automation or online. The website is on there as well. And you can see other things when you go in to pay your bill online, you can see graphs detailing consumption history, which might interest some, or if your billing is high, you can see which months it's higher. So there will be some different features of it that may be helpful.
That's quite the process.
Involved and incorporated with the other enterprise funds that we got, for instance, the golf, the rec, the new pool. Will that be, some people want to pay online, kids, you got it, here it is.
There will be.
Something like
We're
that.
slowly incorporating other things into being able to be paid online, such as certain permits and application fees.
I know you got the Corn Palace you can pay online.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Show or
Yeah.
whatever.
And you can in Park and Rec, they have a program that you can pay for your stuff that way when you sign up for a program. But yeah, we're kind of stepping into things. We try one release and then as soon as we get the bugs worked out, we can spread it further.
Michelle, will this avoid mailing my bill to me if I sign up for that?
Yeah, you can already sign up. This was even previous to this. You could sign up for electronic billing, so the bills are emailed as well.
Versus the mail?
Yep.
Perfect.
Anything else on project updates?
No, I guess the council had asked about Sanborn, and just to let you know, we are going to be meeting one more meeting with property owners. It'd be Monday, December 11th. We anticipate that on December 18th, we'll be bringing to you action to set the date for bid opening. So we'll have further discussion at that time. That's the only other updates I have, unless you guys have any questions.
Okay, next we'll move on to.
I'm just going to mention real quickly, Mayor, you had put in your notice to us that we got the building purchase.
Yeah.
Yep, the closing on the Northwestern Public Service Building was last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
Yep. So that's been finalized. You'll see that later in the contingency transfers, the cash allocation over to Corn Palace. And then we're going to proceed with discussions with the Development Corporation now for the future use of the facility.
And,
Right now, they're still in there. So
and why are we involving them?
That was the last direction I got. If you would like to give different direction, we can go different way.
I didn't realize we said, well, let's buy this building and have them profit from it by subleasing it out or whatever the plans are for it. Or are they gonna develop the plans for it, or, you know, I just, I saw
Really,
that.
it's
and I
kind of
didn't-
up in the air right
Right.
now. We
No
were
plans
just
right
kind
now,
of seeing what they had in mind.
What the potential options are for the reuse of the facility. I guess if you guys want to go a different direction, you can always give me that too.
Yeah, I'm on the development corp, and the mayor sits as a liaison too, and so then what we're gonna do is reach out to see if they had some suggestions for the building and how that would work, with us. And of course, they already own the scoreboard in that area, and we've always looked at maybe kind of redesigning how that mall would be in that. So we're just on the initial part of reaching out across the street and seeing what they had in mind, and then nothing's going to be done until it's approved here.
Used to be determined.
Yeah, it seems to me that we really have three choices with that building. One is to knock it down and build something else, or, you know, extend plaza or whatever we would do. One would be to leave it vacant. And then the other would be to rent it out. And it seems like the Development Corporation would be the natural partner to find somebody. And, you know, who gets the dough is a different question. But, you know, for one, I think it was great that we bought the building. But I wouldn't want to leave it just sit, you know.
I guess the thought is to try to be proactive right now. There's an existing lease that goes through next June, July. So we have time to work it out, just letting you know that we're starting the discussions on what the potential reuse could be. It's not something we're going to be able to do anything in the next 2 to 3 months anyways because of that existing lease.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to the next thing on the agenda, which is action to approve application for renewal of liquor and wine licenses for 2018.
I'm not aware of any issues with any of the applicants.
Move to approve.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Entertain a motion for the city council to recess and sit as the Board of Adjustment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing for December 18, 2017. Amber Kurtenbach has applied for a conditional use permit to operate a family residential child care center in her home located at 801 West 7th Avenue, legally described as lots 1 and 2, Block 27, Raleigh, 2nd Edition, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota. The property is zoned R2, Single Family Residential District.
Set the date.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Entertain a motion for the Board of Adjustment to adjourn and the City Council to reconvene in regular session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Action to approve Resolution R2017-76 contingency transfers.
Do you want to take action first? Or you want an overview? Okay, so the overview on the contingency transfers, as you know, we have $713,000 in the budget. When we started the year, we had $100,000 that we originally earmarked for the results of the salary study. We've been monitoring those wage lines, and most of the budgets, because they're larger budgets, so they have operational expenses, we're able to offset those. The ones that maybe are 1 or 2 people are a little bit more difficult, so you'll see a couple in there, but we didn't end up with many for that. You can see professional services for city council, and that was, we had a public nuisance that we had to contract out due to an existing conflict of interest. We had the remainder of the fire engineering that the council approved last fall, but it was after the budget was already approved. There was a salary line. Again, I don't have an operational budget in my budget, so that's why you can't offset that. Election, this one was just a billing that we received after the fact for an election the previous year. Municipal building, again, this is a salary line. The reason why this one can't be absorbed in the operational expenses is because the utility line looks like it's high for the year, so We don't have anywhere to offset that increase. IT, we have a managed print service contract, but we actually have a reduction in each of the departmental lines for, I think it used to come out of, I can't remember now, utilities? Repair and maintenance. We used to have repair and maintenance contracts for each of the copiers, which got consolidated into one contract. So it's really a net neutral, but that line is over. The other one would be the other financing uses. It's taking the $300,000 of budget authority in, or transfer of cash into the Corn Palace. Michelle is still going to check the cash balance at the end of the year to make sure that the full amount is needed before we transfer. And then any receipt for lease would go deposited back into the general fund to offset that transfer to some extent. As we discussed when you made the purchase, it's not going to recover everything by any means. The other thing, just to point out, you will likely see another contingency transfer at the next meeting. Michelle and I wanted to wait until we could see where we were halfway through the month before we do those, so we're only doing them if necessary. The ones that we're going to continue to watch is the traffic department. We had a LED light conversion on Main Street, which the council authorized, that could require $24,000 contingency, but it looks like the budget is going to be able to absorb that, so we're going to watch that one first. And then we're going to monitor the cash balances on both Park and Rec Fund and the Golf Fund. The Rec Center initially looked like it was going to need a transfer because of the salary study changes, but we think the budget will be okay, so we're waiting on that one to watch. You had already approved a transfer for the sports complex for the vehicle that was, I think it was sports complex. Is that the right budget?
Park and Rec Center.
Sorry, Rec Center. I was like, I have the wrong department listed there for the accident, but depending on how the budget is, we're not going to do that unless it's necessary. And then we still have $250,000 earmarked for any contingency or any sales tax shortfall. So Michelle should have those figures here this week or next, and then we'll know actually how much we need of that as well. Once that second resolution is done, that's when we know what's unspent, so we can talk about the things like the 27th payroll designation that Mel brought up, or any other uses that you would want to designate that cash for. So just giving you an update on where we are with that. You'll see one more resolution.
So we can have that would be at the meeting on the 18th?
Yep, we should know by the end of that. There's still $324,074 remaining in that contingency budget. So a lot of that's going to be dependent on how much we need for sales tax shortfall.
I'd like to make two comments at least. First, thank you, the department heads and other city people, for being frugal enough to cover in your budgets a lot of those salary things and actually even other things that we can cover. And as we get better at budgeting, some of those gaps might be a little smaller than they have been in the past, but that's why we budget and why we try and budget effectively. And then secondly, thanks for making this visible as we've changed in the last 5 years of making contingencies and supplements visible to the public and have to be voted on by the council.
And with that in mind, I will move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is a first reading on ordinance number 2017-16 supplemental appropriations.
And I do need to point out there's a revised ordinance on your desk. We did have to also add in some of the community services fund. This will come out of their cash, but their budget will need a supplement as well. Just a short explanation on the difference between the contingency transfer and the supplemental appropriation. The contingency is taking out of a budget we set aside for 2018. This hearing is actually taking things out of cash, and the reason why is there was revenue that came in that wasn't anticipated to support these. So the reason why these are okay being a supplemental appropriation is because there's cash there to offset it. You're not going to decrease what you have sitting in reserves, if that makes sense for everybody. Just a real quick overview on those. The first one was the general fund for street and sidewalk for 6th Avenue Plaza. That is for alternate B and the design work that was done for the area right in front of the chamber. They provided us with the reimbursement for that, and we're putting that back in because we paid for it through that city project. So they're fully covering that cost of that work as well as the design, which was like $2,500, $1,500, one or the other. I can't remember the breakdown between the alternate B and the design fee.
Yeah.
The next one is kind of crazy. Well, not crazy, but I'm just going to pull this up so we can see it. It looks like you're doing a huge supplement for EMS wages. You know, over $419,000, I think is where we were at. The reason why is we used to just take 2 positions and charge that to EMS and we put everything else in fire. When in truth, it's really a half and half expense because we're running these staff on both EMS and on fire. So we switched the way the budgeting is happening. So although you're seeing a huge supplement into EMS, that same amount is being unspent in fire. So you're going to see a big surplus. I said that right? Fire? Okay.
Yep.
So you're going to see a big budget remaining that was unspent in fire to offset what we switched over to EMS. So again, it's not impacting your savings. It's a net neutral change.
And we budgeted
Next
that
year
way
it's
in
done
2018, right?
I believe, yes, we changed it
Yeah.
for 18's budget, so we should be correct there. And this is just a more accurate way of reflecting what the actual expenses are for those services. I just don't want you to think that we went and hired a bunch of people or something like that.
I should know this, but are these, we have police, we have fire, and then we have EMS? They're not firemen, they're not policemen?
No, actually, just fire and EMS are cross-trained. They do both duties. That's why it made more sense to show half the staff in one and half the staff in other, because they're really doing both services. And they may do an ambulance call and then turn around and do a fire call. So.
And you didn't think it was just as efficient to just have them fire EMS?
No, I don't think so, because if you weren't having fire, it would cost you more than 2 EMS employees in that department. So we aren't accurately reflecting the cost of EMS when we're just
Okay.
putting 2 full-time positions in there.
I understand.
Oh, 4. Is that what it was? We're just throwing out numbers.
Whatever.
5. I think we figured that you would need 8 to run EMS full-time, is that correct? So that's how we, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And, okay, never mind. Okay, great, thank you.
It's just a better way to show the actual expenses, because otherwise we show everything tied to fire, but really both fire and EMS are the expense, and we have the revenue coming in from EMS to offset that as well. And then the last 2, just to note on here, the capital project fund for custom cycles, that's the TIF by Clockworks. And we did the drainage study out of there to see how all this impacts if we were to pave those streets. We do not have the increment there to support those phase 1, 2, and 3 that were proposed as part of that TIF. So Tim came and proposed doing this drainage study to you. I think it's been over a year ago now. So this is the expense of that drainage study. It just wasn't budgeted, so we have to put the budget in place. And I think I covered them all, so.
You didn't do the culture and recreation and the community service.
Okay, sports and, sorry, yeah, I jumped right through those.
I know,
So
it's like,
the
wait, what's different?
Culture and Recreation, Sports Authority, we collect money through our bid for the Sports and Events Authority. There was just a number put in there, but it's not necessarily reflective of the awards. So this is just giving the budget authority for the rest of the awards that they've already approved through the end of the year, so the budget isn't overdrawn. We're not spending any city cash general fund cash, because it's coming out of the bid money, but they have to have the budget authority to write the checks for the promotions they've approved.
So why do we not just do that up? Oh, I guess because we have to wait till we collect them.
Because, and we don't know how much they're going to award when we set the budget. I do think that we'll have a much better idea now that I'm going and participating with the financial side of it. But before, we weren't really getting that information during budget.
Yeah. So since it's a new program, the accuracy of our budgeting was probably poor at the beginning and should get better as we go forward.
Well, and they weren't fully expending everything they were bringing in the first year, so there's about $80,000 of cash sitting there that the Sports and Events Authority could award. It can only be used for that purpose. So even though we bring in $20,000 of revenue and we do $20,000 of expenditure, well, if they have other requests come in that puts them over that 20, you have to give them the budget to write the check. They have the cash sitting there, they just need the ability to write the check.
And I don't think we want to make it where they have to spend the money
Right.
every year because, you know, you may be saving up for getting a big tournament or there
NAI.
And
might not
likewise,
be worth it.
and likewise, and Susan, likewise, I don't want to put the full $80,000 reserve in the budget authority because then you have to find the revenue to offset it, or else we have to show that we're taking it out of that designated. So this works because the cash is sitting there in our account to cover the expenditure, if that makes sense. And then, like I said, the last one, the Community Services Fund. That's right. This one was budgeted in Palace Transit, so you have to get the budget authority into the right budget. It's not taking any general fund money. Again, this is coming out of the Community Services Fund reserve. So you'll have money unspent in another budget, so then the net difference to that fund will be equal. Does that make sense? Okay.
Move to place on first reading?
Clear as mud.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Motion to enter into executive session in accordance with SDCL 1-24-2 personnel. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Carried. Yep.
executive session. Move to adjourn.
Oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. Hold on.